Scary EIRE. EIRE is the Irish or Gaelic word for Ireland. Paranormal means all the things that are impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. And Ireland is steeped in lore, ghosts, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hunger, desperation, and charm. Oh, and the paranormal. Welcome to Scary EIRE.
Mark Manning.
Come in, you poor old craters, and warm your hands by the fire. Fáilte is stuck. No doubt you're all busy in the run-up to Christmas, and a gigantic Merry Christmas to all my Scary EIRE listeners and to everyone on the Paranormal Radio UK network. Stick around, because in a moment, the Squire will enlighten you with a disturbing story of what was known as a Dolachar. Back in the dark years of dirty old Dublin town, my brother Niall and former airline captain gets a UFO UAP mention shortly, and I'll be chatting with Jenny Sullivan, the charming lady who fronts Drogheda's Emerald Isle Paranormal Group. Sadly hear about the last woman to be hanged in County Carlow jail, the tragic Lucinda Sly. Read for us by the radiant Sarah Campbell, voiceover and Northern Ireland radio personality. And sure, we'll bend the rules as well. Just a tad away is Scotland, and Scottish author and businessman Nick Clark shares a true ghost story from his native Glasgow and his life circa 1984, and that'll be narrated by fellow Scot and comedian Billy Kirkwood. Strap yourselves in. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're generally called nowadays, in relation to Ireland. Do I have any stories for you? The short answer is no. And then I thought, have I anything for the guys UFO-wise? My brother retired a few years ago from a 40-plus year career as an airline captain. But anyway, he said to me, "What, UFOs?" I said, "Yeah, any stories at all? I mean, you're flying all time zones at the hour of midnight right into the early morning, wee small hours. Did you ever see anything?" And he said, absolutely a resounding no, I didn't. Then he had a sip of his coffee and a kind of dreamy look came over his face and he went, "Do you know what, Mark? Actually, I do have one story for you. And you won't believe where it happened. It happened as we were on approach into Dublin Airport, over the Irish Sea. All the places in the world I've flown right around the world, the only thing I can think about was this." And he said it was like the late 70s or early 80s. And myself and my co-pilot were approaching for landing into Dublin Airport one night. We came down over the Irish Sea and we were a little bit out. He said suddenly the entire cockpit lit up with glow points. He said it was like, do you remember those old disco glitter balls? You'd see them in the old 1930s, 40s, 50s ballrooms. The big ball, and when it would rotate, the shimmering little lights. He said the entire cockpit lit up with those shimmering and swirling around. And he said, I said to my co-pilot, "Is there someone down there using a laser?" Because it was around the time they were beginning to get popular, little handheld lasers. And the co-pilot said, "No way, there's too many lights. This is mad." So all over their uniforms and all around the cockpit, this thing just kept shimmering and swirling, and they are busy guys. They've got to land an aircraft. So they concentrated on that, and by the time they were nearly landing, the whole thing had just disappeared, and they were back to normal. So there you go. He's retired now in Vietnam, and the last outfit he flew for many years, the biggest passenger jet in the world, the Airbus A380 for Emirates. That's what he was at. What a full life he's had. So yeah, that wasn't so much his UFO story as his UAP story, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. I recently had the pleasure of interviewing author Ciarán Fanning, who just published a new book called Haunted Ireland, an atlas of ghost stories for every county in Ireland. Here's an excerpt called The Dolachar, read by the Squire, aka David McGlynn.
Our story begins with the murder of a young woman in the Liberties. The killer, a man called Dolachar, was soon arrested, tried and sentenced to death by hanging. He was held in the most secure cell in the Black Dog prison. However, he managed to avoid the noose by taking his own life. An expectant crowd waited at Gallows Road, now Bagot Street, for the cart that would deliver the prison to his execution. They protested loudly when they heard the news that Dolachar had killed himself. So they wanted a hanging. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted to see justice done. The prison authorities were severely criticised for allowing such a thing to happen, and though an investigation was carried out, they couldn't explain how it had occurred. The following day, a prison guard was found unconscious in the Black Dog. One side of his body was paralysed, and his clothes were in tatters. When he came to, he recounted being attacked by a dark beast in Dolachar's cell. He described the demon as being half human, half black pig. Rumours spread that it was the angry spirit of the recently deceased prisoner, Dolachar. Prison staff became nervous, especially at night. One night, about a week later, another prison guard went to relieve his colleague, a man called Carlow, who had been on sentry duty, only to find the man's clothes and musket at his post, but no sign of the sentry himself. "The Dolachar!" gasped the guard, rushing off to alert the authorities. "The Dolachar must have devoured him!" The prison was searched extensively, but no trace of the missing sentry could be found, and now the inmates and staff became convinced that the Black Dog was haunted by the ghost of Dolachar. Many of the guards were too terrified to work the night shift alone and had to be paired up with a companion. News of the demonic spirit that haunted the prison soon trickled out beyond its high walls, and it wasn't long before there was a report of the monster assaulting a lady on the streets of the capital. The city authorities called the woman before a magistrate to give a full account of the alleged attack. "I was walking along by Christchurch Lane, me lord, minding me own business and all," said the woman, "when I was dragged into an alley by a ferocious monster." "Can you describe your attacker?" "Well, me lord, he had the body in the shape of a man, but he had a black pig's head with tusks and all." The magistrate dipped his pen into ink and scratched the details onto parchment. "What happened next?" "Well, me lord, I kicked and punched and screamed, didn't I? Me cloak got caught in one of the creature's tusks, giving me the chance to leg it." "And you say you know the name of your attacker?" The woman nodded. "Dolachar." "Do you mean Dolachar?" asked the magistrate. "Yeah, that's what I said, Dolachar." From that moment on, the demon became known as the Dolachar. After that, there were many sightings of the phantom pig in hell and the surrounding areas. There were attacks too, always at night and always on lone women. Dubliners were consumed by fear, and women stopped going out alone after dark. The Dolachar became the talk of the city. And in a tavern in hell, a meeting was called by a group of men to see what could be done. "I say we arm up and kill the beast," said a man with long hair. The crowd cheered in agreement, banging their whiskies on the counter. "How will we find him?" asked an older man. "We know he looks like a pig," said a man with a scar above his eyebrow. "But how do we find one pig in a city full of them?" "By killing every single one of them," replied the man with the scar. The crowd cheered this proposal and agreed to a city-wide cull of all pigs. The following night, as the winter moon was rising, men gathered at the gate of hell, armed with weapons of all sorts. Squeals filled the air as the vigilantes swept through the city, slaughtering every pig they could find. Though the city authorities didn't officially approve of this violence, they secretly hoped that the cull might put an end to the Dolachar's reign of terror. They decided to help by organising carts to collect the dead pigs. However, when the carts arrived the next morning, the carcasses had all mysteriously disappeared. Though city officials never found the carcasses, the cull seemed to have worked because there was no more sightings of the Dolachar that winter. The vigilantes celebrated their victory for many nights in the whisky houses of hell. As spring continued into summer, life in the city returned to normal. The following winter, however, the Dolachar returned. A young woman was passing Wood Quay when she was pulled into Fisher's Alley by a man with a pig's head. But she managed to escape. Her story reawakened terror in the city, and once again women stopped walking the streets alone. One night, a blacksmith from the outskirts of the city was visiting a widow who lived near hell. He was very fond of her and was hoping to one day propose to her. He was a large man with strong arms from a lifetime of betting a hammer off an anvil. The widow poured him a whiskey and filled him in on the latest news of the Dolachar. The blacksmith downed his drink and held out his glass for another. "I thought he disappeared." "He had," said the widow, pouring another whiskey. "But now he's back, so you'd better be careful on your way home." "I think I'm safe enough," he laughed. "Sure doesn't he only attack women?" "It's no joking matter," scoffed the widow. Let him attack me if he wants. I'll teach him a thing or two. He held up his two huge fists and shadow punched the air like a boxer. The widow laughed and poured herself a drink. A few whiskies later, the city bells rang out for midnight. "I'd best be going," said the blacksmith. "Don't want to run into this Dolachar fella." The widow smiled. When the blacksmith opened the door to leave, he realised that it was pouring rain. "I didn't bring me cloak or me hat with me." The widow dashed back inside and returned with a cloak which she wrapped around his shoulders. "Take mine." "But it's a woman's cloak." She pulled the bonnet over his head. "It'll keep you dry, won't it?" The blacksmith pulled at the bonnet's ribbon. "What if someone sees me?" "It's raining and it's dark. Who's going to see you?" said the widow, trying not to laugh at the blacksmith, who looked so ridiculous in her clothes. She kissed him quickly, then pushed him out the door. He was so stunned to get a kiss that he stood there lost for words, with the rain dripping off of his frilly bonnet. "Go on," called the widow, closing the door. "See you next week." The blacksmith pulled the cloak around him with one hand and held the bonnet down with the other. Though he knew he looked silly, he was glad of the protection against the elements. Putting his head down, he began walking through the rain, his boots slapping the puddles. The streets were deserted and lit only by an occasional lamp, whose light reflected off the wet cobbles in splashes of yellow. The blacksmith had to pass through hell on the way home, and he was relieved to find it less deserted. Drunken revellers staggered through the rain while tavern owners locked their doors. He turned the corner onto an empty street, and that's when a dark shape rushed on him from the shadows, slamming against the wall. His attacker, though dressed like a man, had the head of a black pig, complete with tusks. The blacksmith was shocked to find himself face to face with the Dolachar, who in turn was shocked that the person in the woman's cloak and bonnet was actually a man, and quite a big one at that. The beast tried to flee, but the blacksmith swung a mighty fist. If this creature was a ghost like everyone said, the fist should have passed straight through the pig's head. Instead, it connected squarely with the Dolachar's jaw, sending him reeling to the ground. Now that it was squirming at his feet, the blacksmith seemed convinced that this was no demonic phantom, but just a man in disguise. He gave the pig a kick, to be sure, and heard a human grunt of pain. "I have the Dolachar," shouted the blacksmith, jumping on his captive. Up close he could see that the pig's head was merely a mask, which the blacksmith ripped off, exposing the true identity of the notorious Dolachar. By now, people had emerged from buildings, and one woman leaning closer recognised the blacksmith's prisoner. "Mick Carolan," she exclaimed. "So you're not dead after all? Who's Mick Carolan?" "Isn't he only the sentry that went missing from the Black Dog?" said the woman. "The one that was supposed to have been devoured by the Dolachar." Another man recognised the distinctive scar above Carolan's eyebrow. "That's your man who led the pig cull." The crowd dragged the Dolachar through the streets and handed him over to the Black Dog prison, where he was admitted, this time not as a sentry, but as a prisoner.
Mark Manning.
Yeah, a couple of things over the years, but I've learned. Well, I suppose it's not learned. I've just become accustomed to it, and I think it's kind of, it's maybe it's another sense or something. But often when you go into places, you'll get a feeling for the place, and you'll get a feeling of whether or not it's comfortable. And whatever causes that, who knows what causes that, but we have an intuition, we have an inbuilt intuition. I can't describe what it is or where it comes from, or the physics of it or the chemistry of it, but it's there, and anybody will tell you to stick with your intuition. If you think something doesn't feel right, then don't hang around.
Superb advice from regular contributor to Scary Era, David McGlynn, aka the Squire. And don't hang around either. If you've got an Irish paranormal tale to tell, simply email paranormalireland@protonmail.com and it'll be read out for you. Or you get to tell it on air yourself. That's paranormalireland@protonmail.com.
Jenny from Emerald Isle Paranormal. When did you first get an inkling of this veil that exists beyond?
Well, I come from a very large family, and there always had to be that one child that is different, and that would have been me. Gosh, I was too young to think what I'd be thinking, with ghosts or spirits or anything like that, and I would be afraid. I'd be very afraid and I would see things. And then for many years after that, I had put it to one side. And then things just started happening as I got into my teens and older. And then I ended up joining a team and it took off from there.
You joined a team. Is that like a supernatural or?
I had joined a paranormal team in the north of Ireland. In the north of Ireland. And I was with them for many years, about 9 years, something like that. And that's where it all started off. I was thrown in at the deep end.
Where do you hail from originally? Is it the north?
From Drogheda, and I live in Drogheda. My team is based in Drogheda in County Louth.
Well, you're in that advantage straight away because the place is absolutely steeped in history.
I know, it's a great place. I love when people come over from America or when I do my shows. I always advertise Drogheda, the beautiful locations and landmarks that we have in Drogheda, the history of it.
The kind of castle, it's a small thing. It's almost like a Martello Tower on the hill.
That is called the Drogheda Museum Mill Mount. That would be one of my locations that I've been investigating for 9 years. That is the Martello Tower in the museum in Drogheda. Yeah, Mill Mount Museum.
Is it an actual Martello?
It is, yes.
Oh, interesting. And you say it's a museum. I remember it being at one stage a restaurant.
There is a restaurant next door to that. That has now closed down. But the museum used to be a place where people lived and where the British Army barracks were based. And that people used to live in the museum as apartments, and that was up until, I think, 1985.
It's sure panoramic, isn't it? It takes in everything. You can see why it was military.
And investigating the location itself is phenomenal. It's probably one of my favourite places to investigate.
Oh,
it is phenomenal.
This is warming up for a good chat. I want to row back. You said even from a preteen age, you were seeing things. Can you elaborate on that?
My bedroom was facing the backyard, and at the top of it was an old garage. And there was a blue car sitting in it. And there was always something white going around the wheels of the car. Now, it was up off the ground. We watched it over and over again. Things like banging in my living room at night time, and I was told to go back to sleep. Things that I have seen where people wouldn't believe me. People would not believe me. If I have spoken about it many times, but I wish I could have videoed what I had seen in my teens. It was phenomenal. It even has me stumped to this day.
The blue car, was it a car that was in use or was it some kind of an old abandoned car?
It was an old car. It was a family member partner had owned it, and it was an old car. I think it was a light sky blue. I think it was a Honda, something like that. But it was an old car. It wasn't in use. It was just abandoned sitting there. It was our shed. But it was something white that was floating around all four wheels. We sat in my bedroom staring at it.
So were other members of the family seeing these things?
My sisters would have seen it too. Yeah, my sisters would have seen it too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the four of us would be sitting in the bedroom looking out of the window and looking at each other. And they were seeing weird things like, I don't know, some of them could see, I know it's going to sound weird, like a pig's head, and that's not a good thing to see. That is not a good thing to see. So we were kids, so I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even tell you what it was. Could have been a cat, but like I said, it was off the ground, see-through white, and just flying around the wheels of the car.
So, the parents, did you report back?
We didn't say anything to them. We just there was so many of us. There was 11 of us, so it probably would have been I know there were a lot of us. They probably would have just been tales, and we see things as kids and so on. So we didn't really seen it, wasn't curious about it, afraid of it, but never did anything about it.
And was it at night time you'd see these?
It was daytime, yeah.
Daytime?
Yeah.
So if there was a white mist whirling around in the compartment of the car and it's during the day, did you not have a look in, no?
No, we did not.
Because you were scared?
Yes, we were. I remember being scared because I remember, the rest would let it go. I would not let it go. I would always think about it. Yeah. And every time I went into that shed, I would be afraid of it, nervous of it. But I still went into it because we used to play games in the shed and so on and so on. The rest would forget about it. I would remember it.
The area you grew up in, was it very historic?
Yes, I live, I say about 2-3 minutes away from the Boyne River.
So the battleground?
Oh yeah, my house is built on the battleground.
Oh, that has got to be written with phenomena.
Oh, let me tell you the stories from my house.
Yeah.
You really. It was, I would always have to cross the bridge. You cannot get across the other side of town unless you cross the bridge. I am on the battle site of right beside the Boyne River, literally, a 2-minute walk from it.
Let's just stay in those formative years, and I'd certainly advise against it. But back then, Jen, did you mess with a Ouija board or have seances or anything like that?
Guilty. Yes, we did. Yes, of course, when we were younger. And we did it at my old primary school. And we kind of seen white flashing lights, and there was the guard. So we ran with the glass and we threw the glass away, and everybody was panicking because the glass was not broken.
Oh, yeah.
So, it was, we went back the next day to look and trawl into the long grass looking for the glass so we can break it. And we did. We found it and we broke it. But that was the only time I did that when I was younger. It just was not, the answers were not what you would want, obviously.
And was it symbolic insofar as you broke the glass, you broke any potential spell? Was that the thinking?
Yes, you had broken, you had closed it.
Okay.
By breaking
closure.
Yeah, you closed it. Yes, yes.
Life went on and eventually you found yourself in a paranormal team. When was that?
That was, oh my goodness. What year was it?
More than you'd care to remember, I suppose.
I am involved in paranormal about 19 years. And my team is up and running almost 8 years now.
And what's your team called?
Emerald Isle Paranormal Researchers.
The great thing about this is, I'm only involved in it recently, the amount of people, it's like you build it, they will come, the great contacts I've had from all around the place now. And you're at it, 19 years, so you've a treasure trove.
I do. I have a lot of people from around the world that I know and I work with. And I'm doing tours for a fantastic friend of mine, May Hernan. She runs Secret Ireland tours, and I'm going to be one of her investigators and tour guides. She'll take over about 24, 25 people from America, UK, wherever they want to come from, and we do a 9-day tour around Ireland. So she would have great ambassadors such as Chris Fleming or Dave Schrader. Good Lord, I forgot his surname, Dave Schrader. So these are big names ambassadors that she would have to investigate within Ireland. I do a podcast myself, so I'm doing it about 4 years. I have so many friends in America, so many networks I'm involved with in America. I probably know more American than Irish.
Let's not let this gem get by. So what's the name of the podcast?
Shadow Whispers in the Night.
Oh.
I like to pick long names.
That's abstract, but nice. Very attractive. I like it.
Shadow Whispers in the Night.
You say you go around Ireland. So obviously, Emerald Isle. So on the fingers of maybe one hand, what are the kind of key places? Everyone kind of knows Leap Castle. Where do you think? Give us an itinerary there.
Okay, well, we would go to Redwood Castle. Great castle, beautiful in County Tipperary. That's a great. We've been investigating there for about 5 years. Then, of course, the usual Leap Castle. It is exactly what it says on the tin. It is everything. Some people will get something great from it. Some people will not. We have never not gotten anything great from it.
Can I just say, Jenny? I think it's often, just for anyone listening in, it's often described as the most haunted castle in Europe.
I have found it to be extremely haunted. I have to say, all the locations I've been to, and I've been to a lot, even the Millmount Museum in Drogheda is extremely active. Leap Castle has floored me sometimes. Oh my goodness, Leap Castle for me it scares me sometimes. There is one particular room in that castle that I would not sit in, and I don't think I would leave any females sitting in that particular room. It's an extremely active place. We have fantastic video footage on YouTube. Then you have, again, your Hellfire Club in Dublin.
Oh, go on, talk to me about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's very interesting. We do have video footage of something. It's like a light anomaly, we think, going down the wall of it. Something going down the left of it. Oh, we've been told. Well, I've been told, to go away. In another word, you have female voices. You will have male voices that obviously do not like you there. There is particular rooms that people don't like to be in, and they will be the rooms I like. I don't know what it is. The hike up alone scares me more than the Hellfire Club itself.
It's a hike up, and especially if you go up at night and you have to go through the forest to a degree, and the wind blowing in the leaves and all, the atmosphere gets set long before you actually get to the top of Montpellier Hill.
That's it. Oh my God, it's beautiful at night time. It is beautiful at night time.
The view is spectacular. It really is. You can see Dublin from
miles. Yeah, it's. You have so many pictures of it. I've been up there so many times. Have so many pictures of it.
And when you say you hear voices, are these EVPs or are you hearing physical?
They can sometimes be DVPs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obsessed with EVPs. I have done shows on EVPs. EVP would be my thing.
For anyone listening, it's electronic voice phenomenon, is it?
Voice phenomenon, yes. And DVP is disembodied voice phenomenon.
Anything else spring to mind?
Oh my gosh. A place I loved so much, Shane's Castle up in County Antrim.
Never heard of it. Talk to me.
That's where I started off. Thrown in at the deep end. And let me tell you, it is, I've had experiences there that kind of woke me up and shook me up. It's up in County Antrim. And it's kind of like the Red Hand of Ulster. Loch Ness, the largest man-made loch.
Yeah, it's just like a big, if you look at it from a satellite or a map, it's like a big chunk is taken out of Ireland, isn't it? It's huge.
Yes, it's one of the largest man-made lochs.
Oh, it's man-made, is it? I never knew that.
Man-made loch, yeah. Okay. Yes, man-made loch. And there was a race to the land. Whoever reached the land first would have owned it. One guy was really desperate for the land, so he cut his hand off and he threw it onto the land, which is why you have the flag with the red hand. Why they call the Red Hand of Ulster. So he owned the land then.
Oh,
yeah.
He threw his hand in.
He did. He literally did.
He literally did. He did. So, well, I didn't know that. And this is deep in the mythological as well, isn't it? The whole Red Hand of Ulster and all the tribes and...
Yeah.
What's the name of that castle again?
Shane's Castle in County Antrim.
I'm going to Google that.
The castle is in ruins.
Okay.
So we do not investigate the castle. We go through the tunnels.
Oh.
So we don't do the
castle. Under the castle. Under the castle or nearby? Ooh.
On the same O'Neill's land, it's huge. But there's tunnels. If anyone has ever watched Games of Thrones, some of it was filmed.
Oh, right.
In those tunnels. They go on for about 2 or 3 miles. Absolutely petrify you. We used to walk then, oh my goodness, even the memories are coming back to me. So everything will be underneath the ground. You are so far under, there's graves above you.
Would it make one claustrophobic, I'd say?
No, it's wide. Oh gosh, yes, it's wide. I can send you pictures. And each side has vaults, and they're about 30 feet long, if not longer. So there's about 15 vaults on each side. And you go through tunnels, and you go through the maids' quarters. I've been investigating there for about 9 years, every single month consecutively.
And what was the purpose of it? Was it facilities or what was it?
Soldiers. It was for the army. So you'd have British, you'd have French, Spanish.
Imagine my goodness. The EVPs from that, you'll get multilingual ones.
It was phenomenal. I know some of the guys were calling out in French and in Spanish, and I know one of the owners used to kind of, my dog keeps barking. Don't know why my dog keeps barking.
Yeah, but that's amazing. And I never even knew that Spanish or French were in that neck of the woods. I remember Mayo and Galway and places like that. That's amazing.
Yes, it's the place to start off on if you ever, do investigations and so on. It is definitely, it is ran by one team. One lady owns it, but she, you go through herself. She would invite teams into it. And if you do manage to get it is just one of the best locations I've been to. The audio, DVPs, which we'll be getting of women talking, and your jacket will be pulled at and tugged at. And it does make you jump. It makes you jump, or if you're touched, the feeling is different. Oh yes, there's been some, we do live videos and there would be, bleep here and bleep there, because you do get a bit of a shock. But it's fun.
You wouldn't want to be on your own.
Safety by always going with a group of people. You always have to. You'd never go investigating by yourself. With your team, with people. That's it. Be safe with a group of people. Never do it on your own. You never know what can happen.
And Jenny, paranormal, it's a catch-all. Okay, yes. So there's poltergeists, there's spirits, there's EVPs, animal, mystic type stuff. Is there any particular area that's of fascination or of interest for you that you're almost a specialist in?
EVPs. It's what I do. I know my very good friend from the Netherlands, and she had put up a post last week saying, we need to do an EVP show. Jenny will be calling on you. EVP is my thing.
Did you ever feel you could be perhaps, or if you're not, do you know of clairvoyance?
I do. I always say that the longer you're in this field, the longer you talk, you open yourself up. You're opening yourself up. You're allowing, you can hear things or see things. I would hear things. I would have names given to me. And I know it sounds crazy, and I know people haven't, the team was having a great crack with me one night when I was coming out with names, but some of them haven't came true. But I remember being in the museum doing an investigation and so on, and I'm standing there in the room and I'm like, what? I'm going to have to say it, guys. I'm going to have to say it. I'm getting the name Maureen. I don't know why. Maureen is just bumping into, and I'm not that kind of person who will say, do you understand? Can you hear me? Do you understand what I'm saying? I just don't want to say it, but I'm like, guys, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to go there. I'm getting the name Maureen, and I won't stop until I say Maureen. And it sounds like I'm bonkers. And I looked over at one of the guys, and he had a face of him, and I looked at him and I said, do you know him, Maureen? And he said, look at the cabinet just standing beside. So the cabinet that I was standing beside, this man, his second wife's name was named Maureen. And I was like, was it a coincidence? I don't know any Maureens. Was it a coincidence? I don't know. I do not know.
So let me try another one on you. Poltergeist. Experiences of same.
It's hard to say. I remember one New Year's Eve, my husband at the time, he had to get up for work at 6 a.m, and he was telling me about his dad the night before, because he's from Mauritius, and telling me about his dad the night before, and that he passed away at a young age unexpectedly, and how he loved New Year's Eve and so on and so on. So my husband at the time had to get up for work. The alarm was not set, and he had to be up at 6 a.m. About 10 to 6, we heard glass smashing in our bedroom. Like, it was enough that we both sat up, we both jolted. Oh my God, is there a cat in the kitchen? Did she smash one of the champagne glasses? Why is there a sound of glass in our bedroom? It turned out to be, anyhow, his champagne glass had fallen over. Very thin champagne glass. Did not smash. No glass was smashed. No cat was in the kitchen, but the sound of smashing woke us up that it came in from our bedroom. It was his champagne glass. Everything else was standing up, just his was turned over. Whether it was a poltergeist, whether it was a sign from his dad, these things we just have not seen with our own eyes to explain it. We don't know.
Tell us where we can find out all about Jenny Sullivan and Emerald Isle Paranormal. Here, advertise yourself and what you do.
So I run Emerald Isle Paranormal Researchers. You can find us on Facebook, Emerald Isle Paranormal Researchers. You can watch our podcast on Facebook as well, and I'm setting up a new YouTube page, Shadow Whispers in the Night, so you can catch us on that. You can catch Jen Para on TikTok. I do advertise my posters, some of my lives and some of my shows that I have coming up. I am away up in County Tyrone next Saturday night, not for an investigation, but for a para Christmas party.
Lovely.
And then I have a fantastic show coming up on the 20th of December. It is called the Christmas Trivia Quiz, which we have 3 teams together. PJ O'Sullivan from Puckerville Paranormal, his group will be with us. And then we have Portal to the Paranormal, Nando and Sarah from very good friends of mine from the UK. And then, of course, Emerald Isle Paranormal Researchers. And we have fantastic Robin Ramsey from New York. So it is a night of competition, testing our brains, and a lot of squeakers and buzzers.
That'll be a night to remember, Jenny. So listen, Jenny, thank you so much for all of your time, and it's fascinating stuff. I hope we'll all meet again sometime soon. And meanwhile, everyone go online to all those wonderful places. I'll put some links as well down below this. And thanks again, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Once again, we dig into author Ciarán Fanning's book, Haunted Ireland, an atlas of ghost stories for every county in Ireland, available in all good bookshops and online. This is Sarah Campbell now, voiceover and Northern Ireland radio personality, relating to us
The Tragic Tale of Lucinda Sly. You wouldn't expect Carlow Shopping Centre to be haunted, but when you find out it was once a place where prisoners were executed, it makes perfect sense that there might be unhappy spirits around. The shopping centre has seen a lot of paranormal activity over the years, like lights being switched off and on, doors opening and closing by themselves, objects moving on their own, and unexplained noises. Some workers at the shopping centre believe that much of the haunting there is the work of Lucinda Sly, the last woman to be hanged in Carlow. Lucinda Singleton was the wife of a farmer near Tullow in County Carlow. Shortly after her son Thomas was born, Lucinda's husband died of consumption. Afterwards, life was difficult for her. She worked hard, supplementing her income by selling butter in Carlow town. When Thomas left home to become a police officer, Lucinda was lonely, and she wished she had someone to share her life with. Perhaps she should have been happy with her lot, because her wish came true. She got more than she bargained for. As her mother used to say, A little fire that warms is better than a big fire that burns. The big fire that came into her life was a farmer and a horse dealer called Walter Sly. Initially, Lucinda was wary of the man because he had a reputation for drinking too much. But he assured her that his bad habit was behind him. She gave him a chance, and over the next few months they started stepping out together. During that time, Lucinda never saw Walter take more than one single drink, so she was convinced he'd change his ways. Eventually, he proposed to her and asked her to move into his farm. But Lucinda was no fool. She knew that if the marriage didn't work out, she would be left with nothing. So she agreed to marry Walter on condition that she could keep her own farm. "Fine," said Walter, "we'll rent it out." Lucinda was happy but wanted to make the agreement legally binding. So they had an attorney draw up a document stating that Walter would not sell her farm. However, unbeknownst to her, Walter had a clause that the agreement would become null and void if Lucinda wasn't a good wife to him. In August 1831, the couple got married and Lucinda Singleton became Lucinda Sly. They were happy for a while, but Walter soon went back to his old ways and started drinking again, which caused friction between him and his new wife. During one of his drinking sessions, Walter sold his wife's house and farm to the owner of the pub, a man called Langstrom. Lucinda didn't find out until she returned to Tullow to visit one of her old neighbours. On the way, she passed her old house and was surprised to see smoke coming from the chimney. It was supposed to be empty, but she hadn't got round to renting it out yet. Maybe her new husband had taken in a tenant, but if so, why hadn't he told her? Determined to find out, she turned off the road, and though it felt strange, she knocked at her own front door, and she was surprised to recognise the man that opened it. "You're Langstrom, aren't you?" she asked. "The owner of the tavern where my husband drinks." "That's right," he said, also recognising Lucinda. "And you're the butter lady that married Walter Sly." "Walter rented my farm to you?" she asked, clearly disgusted, for she partly blamed Langstrom for her husband's drinking. The tavern owner shook his head and smiled. "Walter didn't rent it to me. He sold it to me." Lucinda was furious and returned home to confront her husband. He told her about the clause that he had secretly added, which allowed him to sell her property if she was a bad wife. But I'm a good wife," she argued. "A good wife does not give her husband cheek," he shouted, hitting her so hard that she fell to the ground. Then he beat her with a horsewhip and threw her out of the house. Lying battered and bruised in a bed of hay in the stable, Lucinda realised that marrying Walter had been the biggest mistake of her life. And now, with no property of her own to return to, she'd have to stay married to a man she hated. From then on, Walter treated her like a slave and was drunk so often that Lucinda had to do all the farm work. It was too much for one woman, so Walter hired a young man called John Dempsey to help. One evening, John witnessed a drunken Walter beating his wife. Stepping in to defend her, John punched Walter so hard that he knocked him unconscious. Walter had been so drunk that when he came to, he couldn't even remember being punched. After that, John and Lucinda grew close and became romantically involved behind Walter's back. It wasn't long before they had fallen in love. For the first time in years, Lucinda was happy and spent every moment with John when her husband was away at the pub or away at the fair. On one of these occasions, a neighbour called Bridget Massey spotted the couple kissing. Rumours began to spread about Lucinda's secret love affair. Even the women who sold butter alongside her in Carlow turned against her. At that time, it was considered the greatest of sins for a woman to be unfaithful to her husband. They branded her the Hag of the Butter. When Walter Sly got wind of these rumours, he smashed one of Lucinda's favourite bowls in anger. His rage reached boiling point, and when he saw the wad of money among the shards of shattered pottery, Lucinda had been stashing some of her butter money away instead of handing it over to her husband, in case she ever needed to escape from him in a hurry. He grabbed the axe that hung on the wall and threatened to kill her. "Do your worst, you drunkard," Lucinda taunted. Walter flung the axe aside and punched her and said, She fell, and when she got up, he hit her again. He was so focused on hitting her, he didn't even notice a small key fall from his pocket, but Lucinda noticed. His wife, bruised and battered and bleeding on the floor, Walter left to attend to a horse fair. When Linda found the energy to move, she crawled over to the key. I think I know what that's for, she thought to herself. In the bedroom, she pulled a box out from under the bed. Walter had never told her what was inside, and he'd always kept it locked. With a shaking hand, she twisted the key in the lock, and it opened with a satisfying click. Inside was a gun. As she took the weapon out, a plan formed in her mind. When John came in from the fields, he was shocked at Linda's bruised and bloody face. I'll kill him, he vowed. Lucinda smiled and held up the gun. No, John. We'll kill him. I wasn't being serious, said John. Lucinda, however, was deadly serious. She told him of her plan to shoot Walter when he came home. Then you'll go to prison, he replied, shaking his head. No, we need to make it look like someone else shot him. Lucinda thought for a moment. We'll say some angry horse trader followed Walter home and shot him outside in the haggard. She said this would be believable because Walter was always making enemies of those horse fairs. John agreed that this was a better plan. But neither of them had ever used a gun before, and shooting a man outside in the dark would be difficult. Lucinda's eyes fell on the axe that Walter had threatened her with. When he comes home, drunk, after a night out, he always falls asleep in his armchair. While he's asleep, we can knock him out with the axe and finish the job outside with a gun. John nodded. That night, as they waited for Walter to come home, John started to have second thoughts about the plan. He was a young man, and he didn't want to go to prison if they were caught. Lucinda, however, was convinced that the plan was her only way out of a violent marriage. She told John that if they were caught, she would take the blame. They turned off the lamp and waited in darkness. Walter would be suspicious if he saw a light on in the kitchen, because Lucinda usually went to bed early. At 10:20, they heard the sound of horses' hooves coming down the lane. Lucinda hid in the bedroom, and John took the gun into the back kitchen, where he usually slept. As predicted, Walter staggered into the kitchen, drunk and talking to himself. He fell into his armchair. Within seconds, he was snoring. Lucinda crept out from her hiding place and took hold of the axe. In the dying light of the fire, John watched her raise it above her head, but she couldn't do it. Her hands trembled, her face was frozen in terror. To make matters worse, Walter was starting to wake up. Quickly, John took the axe from Lucinda and swung it, landing a fierce blow on the side of Walter's head. He fell to the floor, but he wasn't dead or unconscious. He groaned and tried to stand up in panic. John swapped the axe for the gun. "Not here," warned Lucinda. It was too late. John pulled the trigger and killed Walter Sly. The couple stared in horror at what they had done, but Lucinda swiftly snapped out of it. She knew the neighbours would have heard the gunshot. Quickly, get him outside. They dragged the body out into the yard, where John fired another bullet into the wall to make it look like the shooting had happened there. Lucinda had another idea that might throw the police off the trail. She went through her husband's pockets, took his money and his pocket watch to make it look like a robbery. She handed them to John, who put them in his own pocket. Hurriedly, they ran back inside. John cleaned the blood off the floor and the axe, while Lucinda reloaded the gun and locked it away in the box under the bed. Next, she ran through the fields to get to the nearest neighbour, Ben Stacey. By the time Lucinda and Ben had got back to the scene of the murder, more neighbours had arrived. "See, he's been robbed," Lucinda suggested to one of them. "He should have had the pocket watch and some money after selling 2 horses at the fair." A neighbour by the name of John Griffin went through the dead man's pockets, but found no money or watch. Lucinda asked Ben Stacey to go to the barracks in the next town to report the murder. She hoped her son, who was stationed there, would come to investigate and might overlook any holes in her story. Thomas did come, but not alone. He was accompanied by Captain Battersby and a constable named Ernest Hudson. As Lucinda gave them her statement, a doctor arrived to examine the body and declared that Walter must have been shot at close range because his moustache had been singed by the gunpowder. This didn't tally with Lucinda's story, and now Captain Battersby eyed her suspiciously. "Did your husband own a gun?" Lucinda said she didn't think so, but Thomas, thinking he was being helpful, confirmed that Walter did own a gun. He's got one, after he received death threats from a family that he'd evicted. "Well, so where is it?" asked Captain Battersby. "Probably robbed along with his pocket watch and money," suggested Lucinda. When John Dempsey heard this, he remembered that Walter's money and watch were still in his own pocket. He'd been in such a state of shock that he'd forgotten to get rid of them. "I'm just going to get some turf for the fire," he said, intending to get rid of the evidence while on the errand. Constable Hudson nodded that this was fine, but moments later sent a neighbour, Catherine Landrigan, after him to help. She followed John and saw him hide something in one of the stacks of turf, but said nothing. Captain Battersby turned back to Lucinda's son. "Do you think your stepfather's gun was robbed?" Thomas Singleton shook his head. "I know for a fact that Walter never carried his gun. He told me he always kept it in a locked box under his bed." Constable Hudson looked under the bed and returned a moment later with a wooden box. "Do you have a key for this?" Captain Battersby asked Lucinda. When she shook her head, he ordered that she be searched. Lucinda said nothing when the key was found on her. She knew by the captain's scowl that he thought she was guilty. When the gun was removed, Battersby took it away to be examined, telling Lucinda and John not to leave the country. A few days later, John and Lucinda were arrested at Walter Sly's funeral. Lucinda protested that John was innocent of any crime, but the police would not listen. The pair were taken to Carlow town, and they were both charged with murder and locked up in separate cells. As she waited for her trial, Lucinda's mental state deteriorated. Prison guards reported that she spent days and days mumbling gibberish to herself. Her name was splashed across every newspaper in the county. She was the talk of the town. Even before the trial, the people of Carlow had convicted her as a murdering witch. On the 16th of March 1835, the streets around the hall in Carlow were packed with people hoping to catch a glimpse of the witch and the farm labourer who had murdered a poor farmer in cold blood. When the prisoners were brought into the courtroom, the crowd booed and shouted and jeered. Lucinda's defence attorney called locals into the witness box to testify that Walter Sly was indeed a drunkard who had sold Lucinda's farm without her permission. Her claim that she had been physically abused by her husband was backed up by testimony of the neighbours who had seen her cuts and bruises. Her attorney also tried to sell the jury Lucinda's story of robbery gone wrong, but this was debunked when the attorney for the Crown called Catherine to the stand. She said that she had seen John Dempsey hide something in the stack of turf. She had later informed the police, and a constable named Joseph Flanagan then testified he had searched the stack and found Walter Sly's watch. After that, things did not go well for Lucinda. Dr. Thomas Ralston testified that the victim had been shot at close range, which cast further doubt on Lucinda's robbery theory. Bridget Massey said that she had seen Lucinda Sly and John Dempsey kissing. The others testified they'd heard Lucinda say she'd wished her husband dead. The police testified that the accused had lied about the gun. The final nail in the coffin for Lucinda was when John Dempsey himself was put in the witness box. A devout Catholic who wanted God's forgiveness so that he could go to heaven. He confessed to conspiring with Lucinda to murder her husband. "He's lying!" shouted Lucinda, trying to save her lover's life. "He had nothing to do with any of this. Let him go." Lucinda was warned that if she couldn't remain quiet, she would be removed from the court and the trial would continue in her absence. After hours of deliberating, the jury found Lucinda and John guilty of murder. The audience cheered when the couple was sentenced to be hanged. On the 30th of March, 1835, Lucinda Sly and John Dempsey were brought out before a huge crowd that had gathered. They were escorted by 4 policemen, a Protestant minister, and a Catholic priest. Lucinda looked fragile and pale, but John held his head high like a man who was ready to go before God. Lucinda was so weak that a policeman had to hold her up for a while the noose was put around her neck. "Hang the witch!" shouted the crowd. John tried to defend her, but the crowd drowned him out with all their cries. Moments later, the trapdoors were sprung, and Lucinda and John fell to their doom, united in death, if not in life. If you happen to visit Carlow Shopping Centre, look at the keystone in the arch above one of the windows and you will see a slot where the gibbet was fixed. The rope that hanged Lucinda and John was attached to this gibbet. Perhaps it's not the only remnant of their death you will find there. Maybe you'll come across Lucinda's ghost, still walking the halls.
The sad tale of Lucinda Sly makes you want to cry. It was beautifully read for us there by voiceover artist and radio personality Sarah Campbell, who I think is doing live events now as well. You can check her out online. Many years ago, when I got into this game of narration and voiceover, first of all, I narrated an audiobook for a gentleman called Nick Clark, a no-nonsense businessman and author from Scotland. We recently reconnected. He hasn't been too well on himself, but when I asked him did he ever have any paranormal experiences, he related the tale that you're about to hear. Read for you now by his fellow Scot and comedian Billy Kirkwood.
Tonight, let me take you back to a chilling story that remains unsolved. A tale rooted in the very walls of an old Victorian house in Glasgow, where the strange occurrences began the moment the new tenants moved in, not knowing that the house had witnessed unspeakable tragedies in its past. Every creak of its wooden floorboards echoed the lives of those who had since departed. It was in 1984 when my sister, yes, my very own sister, moved into a 4-bedroom house in a quiet street. The type of place where children are meant to laugh and play. But instead, there was a creepy silence that held tight, so tight you could feel it in the pit of your stomach. As she settled into this seemingly normal house, little did she know that the peace would soon be shattered by unsettling sounds, strange whispers, and inexplicable sights. It all began with the unnerving noises that she and her young son Chris began hearing on the upper floor, which seemed to come from nowhere, yet filled the space with a distinct sound of running footsteps like children sprinting across the house, their tiny little feet thumping against the old wooden stairs. But when my sister and I went up to investigate, we found no one there, no signs of anyone. But the sounds persisted, night after night. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, we heard it again. Chrissy's laughter, a sweet, innocent giggle that echoed from upstairs. A sound that carried an eerie chill through our bones. When we went to check, what we found made my blood run cold. Because there, on his bed, were 3 ice creams. Their frozen surfaces sparkling in the dim light, placed perfectly, and the window was wide open, allowing a bitter, cold breeze to sweep in. We asked Chris about it, and he simply looked at us with wide, innocent eyes, said, "My 2 wee friends gave them to me." He gestured to the corner of the room where he insisted 2 little children stood, children who, according to him, had been playing with him for days. My sister and I were both struck with an icy realization that those friends were children who had tragically passed away 2 years earlier in that very house. The spirits lingering, trapped, still wandering the halls through the icy chill in the air, seemed to freeze itself in time. Neither of us could have explained what had happened, why Chris was seemingly communicating with these spectral figures, or how they had been able to reach across the boundaries of life and death. From that moment, the atmosphere in the house became heavier, filled with a presence that we couldn't ignore. As days passed and other incidents began to occur, including flickering lights, items that would move from one place to another with no logical explanation, and the occasional soft sound of a child crying late at night, as though the house itself were trying to tell us something that we weren't ready to understand. It wasn't until years later, when we moved out of this house, that we learned of its tragic past, how a young boy and a girl had met their untimely demise, their lives stolen by a fire that had ravaged the home. A fire that some said was not accidental, the result of the house being cursed. It was this curse that had woven itself into the fabric of the house, lingering for years, waiting for the next residents to arrive and witness the strange occurrences, the supernatural events to unfold. To this day, the house stands as a silent monument to those souls, their presence felt by anyone brave enough to step inside. For they say, if you listen closely, especially on quiet, moonless nights, you can still hear the faint echo of children's laughter or the soft shuffle of footsteps in the distance. If you're lucky, or perhaps unlucky, you might even feel a chill on your skin, a cold breath on your neck, as if the spirits of the house are brushing up against you, inviting you to stay just a little longer to listen to the story they have yet to tell.
Okay, I bet you're cacking your wee trews now. And why shouldn't you be? Scary stuff right here on Scary EIRE. And what's even more scary is I checked out the local history of this place. I broadcast to you from an area called Booterstown on the east coast of Ireland, and I see in 1729 it was infested by rats, and I quote, as big as cats, that ate people, gobbled them up. Terrifying times. And up the road in Rathfarnham, apparently they killed a little girl out in the fields. So, you know, history is all around you. I can't make this show without you. So if you've got a good paranormal story, not necessarily Irish, although it helps, get in touch. Simply email paranormalireland@protonmail.com. I'm Mark Manning. It's been a pleasure to be with you on Scary EIRE. Take care, 'cause I care.